In life, true mastery is not found in controlling the outer world, it is found in disciplining the inner one. You see, when the mouth is undisciplined, it speaks words that break more than silence. It breaks trust, peace, and clarity. When money governs you instead of you governing it, you live in reaction instead of intention. When your mood shifts like the wind, you become a leaf carried by emotion, never rooted in choice. And when the mind is noisy and scattered, even the calmest environment cannot bring peace. To control the mouth, the money, the mood, and the mind, this is not about restriction. It is about liberation. It is about walking through life with awareness, with direction, and with strength that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. So today we train not the world, not others, but ourselves, because the person who has mastered these four speaks with wisdom, lives with intention, feels with balance, and thinks with clarity, becomes unshakable. Let us begin. Your words shape reality. Discipline the mouth to speak with purpose. In every tradition of wisdom, the power of speech is revered, not because words are decorative, but because they are creative. Words build or destroy, heal or wound, lift or crush. A single sentence can ignite peace, and another can plant seeds of division. The undisciplined mouth often speaks from emotion, from ego, from pain. It reacts before reflecting. It declares before discerning. But the disciplined mouth is a result of a trained mind and a steady heart. It understands that silence is not weakness, and that restraint is not suppression. It is precision. To speak with purpose is to become mindful of the space between thought and expression. It means you no longer let your tongue run ahead of your spirit. You begin to ask, is this necessary? Is this true? Is this spoken from wisdom or from impulse? Discipline over the mouth is not censorship, it is clarity. It's the recognition that every word carries vibration. Every phrase you release enters the energetic field and either harmonizes or disrupts it. You begin to realize that your words either nourish your environment or poison it. When the mouth is untrained, it gossips, it complains, it exaggerates, it defends unnecessarily. These habits seem small, even harmless, but over time they erode integrity, steal energy, and invite chaos. Complaining, for example, focuses the mind on lack and reinforces a mindset of victimhood. Gossip disconnects you from your inner stillness and attaches you to the flaws of others. Defensive speech often hides a wounded ego that cannot sit with discomfort. When you learn to observe your impulse to speak, to justify, to prove, you begin to uncover the deeper layers of self. You begin to discover how many words are spoken not to add value, but to avoid silence, to fill emptiness, or to seek validation. To discipline the mouth, you must first discipline the inner world. The mouth only echoes what the mind believes and what the heart contains. If the mind is restless and the emotions unregulated, speech becomes reactive, rushed, and often regrettable. But when the mind is still and the emotions are understood, the speech becomes thoughtful, grounded, and powerful. You no longer speak to control the outside world, you speak to express what is aligned within. This kind of speech carries authority, not noise. In moments of conflict, the power of a disciplined mouth becomes most evident. Instead of escalating a situation with harsh words or defensiveness, you remain silent or respond with calm. Not because you are afraid, but because you are strong enough to wait. You do not need to win an argument. You are more interested in truth than being right. You choose timing, you choose tone, you choose presence. That restraint becomes a force of transformation, often diffusing tension and commanding respect. The most powerful people are not those who speak the most, but those who know when and how to speak. Disciplining the mouth also involves honesty, not brutal, uncontrolled honesty, but conscious, compassionate truth. Speaking your truth does not mean saying everything you feel in the moment. It means saying what is necessary for growth, healing, or clarity while being anchored in love. It means knowing that your words are medicine, and with medicine comes responsibility. Sometimes your silence will speak louder than 1,000 words. Sometimes your pause before responding will shift the entire atmosphere of a conversation. That is the power of self-governed speech. The practice of sacred speech also transforms how you speak to yourself. Most people live with an internal dialogue far more damaging than any external criticism. Words like, I can't, I'm not good enough, I always fail. These become inner scripts that create external patterns. But once you understand the creative power of language, you become intentional. You stop speaking failure over your life. You stop diminishing your identity with careless labels. You replace self-sabotage with self-command. You learn to speak as if the universe is always listening. Because it is. Through your own subconscious, you begin to notice how certain words carry weight and others carry distraction. You choose words that align with your intention. Instead of saying, I'm busy, you say, I'm focused. Instead of saying, I'm stressed, you say, I'm recalibrating. You shift the energy behind your language, and in doing so, you shift your reality. This is not about pretending. It's about remembering that your vocabulary is a reflection of your internal world, and by shifting it, you shift the atmosphere around you. The person who disciplines their speech also begins to master timing. They understand that sometimes the most potent words are not said in the heat of the moment, but when hearts are ready to receive. They understand that words offered without readiness often fall on deaf ears or inflame wounds. So they wait, they observe, they measure, and when they speak, their words land like truth, not like noise. This level of intentional speech brings clarity to relationships, structure to leadership, and grace to communication. How's that? Communication. Discipline over the mouth doesn't mean silence in the face of injustice or wrong. It means choosing your words as instruments of transformation, not weapons of reaction. When a person with integrity speaks, they do not need to shout. Their words carry weight because they are rare, refined, and rooted. They are not trying to impress or convince. They are offering what is needed in the moment with care and conviction. Even in casual conversations, the person who has trained their speech speaks life. They uplift without flattery. They correct without judgment. They affirm without attachment. They are aware of the subtle energy in every word and choose to be a source of calm rather than chaos. Over time, their relationships deepen, their influence grows, and their presence is sought after, not for entertainment, but for clarity. Discipline in speech is also an act of humility. You no longer need to dominate conversations. You no longer seek to be the loudest voice in the room. You allow space for others. You listen more. You speak less, but what you say carries intention. This humility is not weakness. It is quiet power. It is presence without pressure. It is the ability to impact without imposing. A disciplined mouth also leads to a disciplined life, because when your words are clean, your energy becomes focused. You stop wasting time on meaningless talk. You begin to honor the value of silence. You cultivate inner peace because you are no longer entangled in unnecessary drama, debates, or distractions. You recognize that the mouth is the doorway of intention. What you speak, you welcome. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you declare, you direct. So you speak slowly. You speak kindly. You speak clearly. You speak with purpose, because you understand now that your words are not just sounds. They are seeds. Money is energy. Master it or be mastered by it. It moves through our lives as more than currency. It reflects beliefs, priorities, fears, and discipline. When you do not understand its nature, you become ruled by it. You chase it, you fear its absence, you cling to it, or you spend it recklessly. But when you begin to understand that money is simply energy responding to intention, clarity, and responsibility, you shift from survival to stewardship. You stop asking how to get more and start asking how to manage what you have. With wisdom, the undisciplined relationship with money is not solved by increasing income. A person who cannot manage little will not magically manage much. Wealth without structure becomes stress. The high-value life is not defined by what you possess. It is shaped by how you direct what flows through your hands. Money, when approached with mindfulness, becomes a tool that supports your vision. It creates space for freedom, creativity, generosity, and stability. But when ignored or idealized, it creates anxiety, debt, confusion, and imbalance. To master money, one must first master the mindsets that govern it. Money itself is neutral. It does not love or hate, bless or curse. It mirrors the energy of its holder. If you hold beliefs rooted in scarcity, shame, or guilt, money will become a source of tension. If you see money as evil, it will avoid you. If you see it as your servant to purpose, it aligns with you. It moves toward clarity. It responds to order. You cannot attract what you secretly resent. You cannot sustain what you unconsciously fear. The disciplined person creates structure for their finances, not from obsession, but from respect. Just as you do not waste your time on meaningless distractions, you do not let money escape into unconscious spending. Every purchase, every saving decision, every investment becomes a reflection of your values. It is not about restriction, it is about alignment. When you understand what matters most to you, your money starts to follow that path. And when your spending aligns with your values, you no longer feel depleted, you feel empowered. To master money is to learn restraint. It is learning to say no, not just to things you cannot afford, but to things that do not align with your greater purpose. The world will always offer temptations, sales, comparisons. But the trained mind says, I do not need more to feel more. It knows the difference between investment and impulse. It knows that a calm financial state is more powerful than a temporary thrill. The high-value individual does not find worth in possessions, but in direction. They do not seek validation through spending. They seek fulfillment through wisdom. Gratitude is one of the greatest tools for mastering money. When you are grateful for what you have, you develop an abundance mindset. Gratitude does not mean passivity. It means you recognize what is already working, and what you recognize, you multiply. Most people chase wealth from a place of fear, afraid of not having enough, of being left behind, of being judged. But fear-based goals only create more scarcity. True financial power begins with appreciating the value of simplicity, of conscious choices, of small daily acts of discipline. And the relationship with money often reflects one's relationship with self. If you feel unworthy, you will sabotage financial stability. If you lack vision, you will spend to fill the void. But when you begin to heal your identity, to honor your time, and to value your growth, money becomes a reflection of that healing. You begin to attract opportunities not because you chase them, but because you've created the internal order that invites them in. Wealth flows toward clarity, and clarity only comes through consistent self-reflection. Money mastery is also about emotional regulation. Many spend to soothe, to escape, to impress. But the disciplined soul knows how to sit with discomfort without reaching for a purchase. They know how to say no when it's easier to say yes. They understand that power is not in the object but in the choice. When you train your emotions, your finances follow. Emotional intelligence leads to financial intelligence because you no longer need your money to prove your identity. You use it to express it. Saving is not about hoarding, it is about stewardship. Investing is not about gambling, it is about vision. Generosity is not about people-pleasing, it is about overflow. These shifts happen only when the mind has been trained to view money not as the goal, but as the means. You begin to understand that wealth is not what you show, it is what you sustain. It is not what you post, it is what you build. It is not what you flaunt, it is what you pass on. Legacy is not created in one big moment. It is built in daily decisions, in small acts of respect for your future self. You stop seeking fast results, you embrace slow mastery, you budget not because you are afraid, but because you are focused. You plan not because you are obsessed, but because you are aligned. You check your spending not out of guilt, but out of responsibility. And this responsibility frees you. It frees you from fear, from chaos, from dependence. You begin to walk differently, not because of what's in your account, but because of what's in your awareness. Financial mastery is also spiritual. It teaches trust. There will be seasons of more and seasons of less, but when you've trained your mind to manage both, you remain steady. You stop panicking in scarcity and stop overspending in abundance. You remain anchored. You know that what you steward well grows. You know that your value is never in a number, but in how you show up in every season. And because of this groundedness, more comes without force, without fear. You teach others through your example. You show that wealth is not noise, it is peace. That money does not control you, it serves your mission. You inspire not by luxury, but by stability. Not by excess, but by intention. People around you begin to feel safe in your presence because your relationship with money reflects inner order. That order creates impact, and that impact becomes your silent legacy. Your mood is not your master. Train your emotions. Don't obey them. Emotions are energy in motion, signals that arise to inform you, not control you. Yet for many, mood becomes a ruler. When we are angry, we lash out. When we are sad, we withdraw. When we are anxious, we react. The untrained self becomes a servant to whatever feeling shows up in the moment. But the trained individual learns to observe emotion without becoming it. The discipline of mastering your mood begins when you stop identifying with your emotional state and start recognizing it as a passing experience. To train the emotions is to develop inner space between stimulus and response. Something happens, you are criticized, ignored, interrupted it, and in that moment, before the mood rushes in to take over your words, your tone, your posture, there is a space. In that space is your power. Most never access it because they move too fast. They allow feelings to speak before reflection can whisper. But those who slow down, who breathe, who sense what is happening internally before acting externally, those are the ones who remain grounded in chaos, who keep clarity in confusion, who lead when others collapse. Mood becomes dangerous when it is allowed to drive decisions. An untrained mood can ruin relationships, sabotage opportunities, and distort reality. What you feel is real, but it is not always true. Emotions must be validated, but not always obeyed. The disciplined mind can sit with sadness without spiraling into despair. It can hold anger without becoming destructive. It can notice fear without feeding it. You begin to see emotions not as enemies, but as teachers. Each one arrives to show you something about yourself. Your wounds, your expectations, your unspoken needs, your attachments. When you stop fighting them and start studying them, you gain access to deep wisdom. To train your mood is not to suppress your feelings, it is to understand them. Suppression leads to numbness and disconnection. Understanding leads to integration and strength. When you feel anger rising, instead of exploding, you ask, what boundary was crossed? What belief was challenged? When you feel sadness, you ask, what have I not grieved? What am I still holding on to? Emotional mastery comes through inquiry, not avoidance. It requires courage to look at what you feel and ask, what is this here to teach me? A person who is led by mood will often speak words they regret, make promises they cannot keep, or burn bridges they later need. This creates instability and distrust. But a person who leads their mood creates reliability and peace. People feel safe around them, not because they are always happy, but because they are emotionally steady. They don't transfer their inner storms to the people around them. They don't bleed on others from wounds they haven't tended. They learn to pause, to ground, to shift internally before reacting externally. That ability to regulate emotion is not weakness, it is power. Mood training also allows you to choose your energy rather than being at the mercy of it. When you wake up tired, you don't let the fatigue write your attitude for the day. When you're discouraged, you don't treat others with coldness. When you're overwhelmed, you don't drown in distraction. You acknowledge the feeling, but you return to focus. You choose presence over paralysis. This is emotional discipline, not a denial of humanity, but the expression of maturity. It is knowing how to act from your values, not just from your feelings. This level of discipline takes daily practice. You learn to check in with yourself in the morning, not just mentally, but emotionally. What am I carrying today? Is this mood mine, or did I absorb it from someone else? Am I reacting from the present or from an old wound? These questions create space. They interrupt automatic reactions. And in that space, you find the freedom to choose your response. Training your emotions also transforms how you relate to others. You no longer demand others to regulate your state. You stop blaming them for your feelings. You recognize that while people can influence your mood, they do not control it. You do. You stop saying, they made me feel this way, and you start saying, I chose this reaction, and I can choose another. This shift in ownership moves you from victim to creator, from reaction to reflection, from chaos to clarity. Your relationships become cleaner, more honest, less codependent. You don't need others to fix you or constantly affirm you. You know how to sit with your own discomfort, how to soothe your own triggers, how to speak without projecting. And because of that, you become a safe space for yourself and for others. People trust you not because you suppress emotion, but because you do not weaponize it. You become a source of stability even when life is unstable. Mood mastery also protects your energy. You no longer let every emotion dictate how you use your time. You don't quit just because you're frustrated. You don't avoid growth just because it's uncomfortable. You build emotional resilience, the ability to feel deeply without losing direction. This resilience allows you to show up consistently, to keep promises, to be present in every environment without being consumed by it. You also begin to choose the environments that support emotional stability. You spend less time around people who constantly trigger chaos, drama, or manipulation. You recognize that your mood is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. You set boundaries not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You protect your internal state because you understand that your mood affects your thoughts, your words, your creativity, your decisions. Everything flows from the emotional center. In solitude, you become even more refined. You sit with your feelings without needing to fix them immediately. You let the wave rise and fall. You allow the sadness to move through. You let joy expand without clinging. You begin to trust that every emotion has a lifespan, and the more you honor it, the less power it has over you. Mood no longer becomes a storm. You become the sky, spacious enough to hold all conditions without being controlled by any. This training makes you powerful in unseen ways. When someone tries to provoke you, you remain calm. When life throws unexpected trials, you breathe before reacting. When you feel low, you don't spiral. You adjust. And because of this, you no longer fear emotions. You walk with a quiet confidence, knowing that whatever arises, you can handle it. Not because you control life, but because you've learned to control how you meet life. You lead your mood instead of letting it lead you. You use emotion as information, not identity. You cultivate stillness even in the presence of chaos. And this stillness is not passive. It is the strength that allows you to feel everything without becoming overwhelmed by anything. A scattered mind is a weakened spirit. Stillness is the gateway to power. In a world driven by speed, noise, and distraction, the ability to direct your attention is no longer just a skill. It is a form of self-defense. The untrained mind is reactive, fragmented, and easily hijacked by urgency. It jumps from one thought to the next, pulled by whatever external stimulus shouts the loudest. This mental scattering drains energy, weakens focus, and creates a state of chronic unrest. You may feel busy, but you are not effective. You may appear productive, but you are not aligned. True power does not come from doing more. It comes from doing with intention. And intention is born in stillness. Stillness is not inactivity. It is presence without tension. It is clarity in the midst of noise. It is the ability to witness thoughts without being consumed by them. The scattered mind believes every thought must be followed, every idea must be acted on, every emotion must be analyzed, but the disciplined mind knows how to observe without attaching, how to wait before reacting, how to be fully engaged without being mentally chaotic. In stillness, you are not absent, you are anchored. You begin to see clearly what matters and what doesn't, what serves your purpose and what steals your focus. The fog of overthinking begins to lift. The mind left untrained becomes a source of suffering. It replays the past, projects into the future, and distracts from the now. It creates internal arguments, imaginary scenarios, and exaggerated fears. You begin to carry burdens that don't belong to you and prepare for battles that may never come. This constant mental stimulation weakens your nervous system, shortens your attention span, and dilutes your presence. But when you train the mind to return to the moment, to breathe, to notice, to pause, you begin to reclaim your energy. You realize that silence is not empty, it is full of answers. A scattered mind reacts to everything. A still mind chooses what to respond to. This shift is subtle but life-changing. You stop wasting energy on things you cannot control. You stop engaging in conflicts that don't deserve your attention. You stop trying to explain yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Mental stillness gives you the ability to discern between urgent noise and important truth. You begin to live with more intention and less reaction, more depth and less distraction. Discipline of the mind also influences how you process challenges. When something goes wrong, the scattered mind spirals into panic, blame, or avoidance. The still mind steps back, breathes, and observes. It asks, what is this situation really asking of me? What can I learn here? What is the wisest action I can take now? This creates a space between problem and panic, between discomfort and chaos. In that space lies clarity. You begin to move through life, less like a leaf blown by wind and more like a rooted tree that remains firm regardless of the storm. Mental stillness sharpens intuition. In a noisy mind, the inner voice of wisdom is drowned out by fear, comparison, and doubt. But in the quiet, you begin to hear with clarity what your soul has been whispering all along. You recognize what resonates and what doesn't. You feel when something is off, even before the evidence arrives. You sense when to say yes and when to walk away. This inner knowing becomes a compass that no amount of external chaos can distort. But it only speaks when the mind becomes still enough to listen. Training the mind begins with awareness. You cannot change what you do not observe. You start by noticing the patterns, how often your mind drifts, how frequently you react without thinking, how easily your focus is hijacked. Then you return, gently but firmly, to the present moment, again and again, through breath, through silence, through grounding practices. Mental discipline is not a one-time act. It is a lifestyle of returning to the now, returning to the breath, returning to the awareness that your power is not in how fast you think, but in how clearly you do. Stillness also gives you access to creativity. The scattered mind is too busy surviving to innovate, but the calm mind creates space for ideas to rise, for insights to land, for solutions to form. In stillness, the mind becomes like a calm lake that reflects truth instead of distorting it. You begin to receive rather than force, to align rather than chase, to magnetize rather than exhaust. This is the deeper power of mental discipline. It does not just quiet the noise, it amplifies the truth beneath it. A still mind also strengthens emotional regulation. When your thoughts are in order, your feelings become clearer. You can tell the difference between a passing mood and a deep knowing. You no longer confuse temporary discomfort with long-term truth. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from awareness. You realize that not every feeling is a command and not every thought is a fact. The space between stimulus and response becomes your place of strength. In that space, you reclaim your authority. Mental discipline also affects your relationships. When your mind is scattered, you listen to reply. When it is still, you listen to understand. You become more present, less defensive, more curious, less judgmental. People feel seen and heard in your presence, not because you always agree, but because you are fully there. Your attention becomes a gift. Your presence becomes a sanctuary. This depth of presence is not common in a world full of divided attention. And it becomes a quiet form of leadership. The still mind sees the big picture. It does not get lost in petty conflicts, fleeting trends, or emotional turbulence. It holds vision while walking through detail. It plans without panic. It acts without urgency. It leads with grace instead of control. This is the energy of the master, not the one who dominates others, but the one who governs themselves. Their strength is not loud, but it is unmistakable. You feel it in their eyes, their speech, their decisions. It is the fruit of years of practice, of inner work, of choosing stillness over stimulation. And in the end, the mind becomes your ally, not your enemy. No longer racing in circles, no longer dominated by noise, no longer filled with constant doubt. It becomes focused, calm, alert, and in that calmness you begin to touch a deeper wisdom, one that does not need to rush or panic, one that knows that clarity is not something to chase. It is something you return to by choosing stillness again and again.